Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight? Thank you all so much for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Toby Altman, and I'm the new director of the RCAH Center for Poetry. And on behalf of Anita Skeen and Lori Hollinger, Anita, founding director, and Lori, the assistant director of the Center for Poetry, it's a real pleasure to welcome you all to the Center for Poetry and to the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities at Michigan State University. For tonight's event, Wheelbarrow Books presents Carolyn Forché and Brad Johnson. Tonight's event is the kickoff of our Spring Poetry Festival, Witness, Remember, Resist. And I just want to mention some of the events that we have coming up over the next couple of weeks here at RCAH. We have an extraordinary group of poets coming to campus, so I hope that tonight's reading will whet your appetite for more poetry, and that we'll see you right back here soon. So next week, next Wednesday, on April 2nd, we are welcoming Era D. Matthews, a Michigander, a Kresge Fellow, and a recent winner of the Yale Younger Poets Prize. And then on April 9th, we'll be hosting Kenzie Allen, whose first book, Cloud Missives, I know many of you have been reading, and it is a moving and rich meditation on Indigenous identity and poetics. Kenzie will also be offering a public workshop on Thursday, April 10th in the Multicultural Center at MSU. And then finally, on April 19th, we will host SummerSlam 5, curated by the former Lansing Poet Laureate Masaki Takahashi, and featuring nationally renowned slam poets such as Ayanna Florence and Breeze the Poet, alongside local and MSU poets, including Claire Donahoe, the president of the MSU Poetry Club. So I called it extraordinary, but it does feel like too small of a word for all the things that are going on in the next couple of weeks, and I hope you'll come and soak it all in with us. So before I turn the evening over to Anita, who will be introducing our readers, let me just take a moment to acknowledge the history of colonialism and violence that has led to our presence on this particular land together. I'd like to read a land acknowledgement drafted by the American Indian and Indigenous Studies Department here at Michigan State. Quote, Michigan State occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, for historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who are forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Michigan State University more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. Close quote. A land acknowledgement is, of course, an imperfect tool for achieving justice, but it is important nonetheless, particularly at this moment, to insist that we reckon meaningfully with our history, that we refuse to look away from what that history means. I hope that tonight's reading and all of our readings over the next few weeks will help us do that, will help us witness, remember, and resist. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn things over now to Anita Skeen, who will introduce our readers for the night.
Thank you, Toby. It's wonderful to be up here and not be in charge. I'll just say that. And this is, I do want to say, this is the third in the series of Wheelbarrow Books readings that we've had, starting 3 springs ago, when we had Carol Davis, who had selected Marion Boyer's book, Ice Hours. Last year we had Gabriella Calvacaresi, and she had selected Daniel Lassel's book, Spit. And tonight we have Carolyn Forché and Brad Johnson, and she selected his book, Smuggling Elephants Through Airport Security. So I'm just going to say a little bit about Wheelbarrow Books and then introduce Brad. And you can see the wonderful banner we have over there, and our logo was done by Sarah Teppen when she was a student here, and her parents are in the audience, Gene Kruger and Brian Teppen, and we're really happy to have them with us. Wheelbarrow Books, established in 2016, is an imprint of the RCAH Center for Poetry, with publication and distribution by the MSU Press. And it's a venue of publication for both emerging and established poets. With an editorial board of 12, which includes such luminaries as Carolyn Forché, Naomi Shihab Nye, Mark Doty, Gabriella Calvacaresi, Tahimba Jess, Thomas Lynch, and others, and our own Layla Chatty, all of whom are willing to serve as a final judge for the Wheelbarrow Books Poetry Competition. And we have a group of dedicated poets from places as diverse as Texas, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and British Columbia, not our 51st state, who read and respond to around 70 manuscripts for each round of submissions. And we have just selected our 15th manuscript, Singing Under Snow, by New Mexico poet Ann Haven McDonald. With our press name, we pay homage to William Carlos Williams and his iconic The Red Wheelbarrow. Readers will remember the poem begins, "So much depends upon that red wheelbarrow." In our country today, with significant issues of climate change, inflation, cultural fracture, political unrest, and violations of personal freedoms, many people would say their lives do not depend on poetry. But good poems have immediacy, present us with specific people in specific situations not unlike our own, and most of all, good poems tell us the truth. With Wheelbarrow Books, we hope to give voice to that truth, to the many different truths that sustain and connect us. Help us spread the word. In the beginning was the Word, we're told, and the Word became the poem. So much depends upon the collaboration of reader, writer, and poem, the intimate ways we have come to know one another. And now you are about to get to know Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson is a Michigan-born poet whose second book, Smuggling Elephants Through Airport Security, was selected by Carolyn Forché for the 2018 Wheelbarrow Books Poetry Prize. Forché, who judged the established poet contest that year, described Johnson's work as a kaleidoscopic tour of the American moment. Poets like Brad Johnson delight us with new images, new ways of thinking and being in the world. They move us from the mundane to the mysterious, the improbable to the plausible. Using poetic elements like allegory and metaphor, Johnson writes about life in South Florida, with topics ranging from hurricanes and professional athletes to emojis and rock stars. Work of his has been published by Carolina Quarterly, Haydensbury Review, J Journal, Meridian, Poet Lore, Tar River Poetry, and others. His first full-length poetry collection, The Happiness Theory, was published in 2013 by Main Street Rag, and it focuses on South Florida. There are poetic moments on the line at CVS, in the parking lot, at Publix, in the left lane at 95, he said. What I've done is taken a lot of everyday common experiences and put them into poems. Brad Johnson holds an MFA from the University of Miami and teaches at Palm Beach State College. I have not encountered many poets as brave as Johnson, Carolyn Forché writes, as willing to go anywhere and see what happens, all the while imagining that even here, even now, it is possible to find one's way. Please welcome Brad Johnson.
Thank you so much, Anita. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm honored and flattered and humbled, and having Carolyn Forché like my work is awesome. And Anita and Lori and everyone involved in Wheelbarrow Books has been so fantastic to work with, and it's such an amazing legacy that Anita has here, and Toby, I think it's spectacular. It's great to meet you as well. I wanted to begin with the, first of all, by showing you the cover. This was one of my students. I try to get my students to do all my covers just because I like working with them and seeing how they sort of interpret what I've done. And I could not have done that. So I'm going to read the title poem, Smuggling Elephants Through Airport Security. Audrey and her husband pick us up at LaGuardia and ask how our flight was. I tell them about going through security in Fort Lauderdale, how the belt buckle my mom gave for my birthday, shaped like a revolver cylinder, looked suspicious, like a weapon. to the TSA agent and how I spent the time it took my wife to be x-rayed and reshoot, explaining how the buckle was meant to look like a revolver but was not in fact a gun. To illustrate my point, I showed the agent the yellow elephant my son crayoned on the green construction paper during the drive to the airport. Elephants, I said, are not allowed through security. Then I pointed to the picture my son drew, insisting, but a representation of a thing is not the same. This is not an elephant. The agent said he understood my buckle wasn't real, but warned how replicas might be mistaken for authentic by agents at different terminals. I tell Audrey how odd it felt, debating Plato, arguing about shadows projected on cave walls in American airports, when her husband in the back seat says he knows exactly what I mean. When they last traveled through Hartford, TSA confiscated their son's Play-Doh, claiming it resembled explosive clay. The next poem takes a line from Foucault, which I think makes this a quality university poem as opposed to a coffee shop poem. And the idea of the archaeology of silence is the idea in countercultures, they have to learn how to communicate and speak and exist in a land that doesn't allow them language. Archaeology of science. Can we assume the bald man dresses himself in skin-colored turtleneck to intentionally resemble a phallus, or must he announce he studied Freud? When she suggests I think outside the box, I respond that saying thinking outside the box is an example of thinking inside the box. She looks at me like I'm French-Canadian, her eyes dull as tulip bulbs that never bloomed, and claim I resemble Connecticut. My best qualities, my proximity to New York. Her diction's as crowded as a Walmart parking lot on Sunday, but the more she talks, the less I listen. My protest pointless as pockets in an infant's pajama pants. It's better not to admit the thoughts double parked in my brain extend to, there's an awful lot of wrinkles in these wrinkle-free pants. It's probably the creamer, but this coffee tastes like crayon. Should I tip the delivery drone and wish it a good weekend? We're all geniuses when we're quiet. Should I join a gym to look like a guy who goes to the gym? Do I purchase fireworks from the man with 3 fingers on his right hand? The miracle of miracles is people believe in miracles. Sometimes silence is the stone shown but never thrown. Still, we honor the artist, not the art. Credit the rebel who hurled the rock with heroism, never the rock itself. This is a poem called The Factory about Andy Warhol. Rachel shows me the Brillo box snow globe she bought from the Andy Warhol Museum gift shop last time she was home, and tells me they had a Velvet Underground room that closed due to little traffic and lack of interest, which is why I think Warhol left Pittsburgh for New York in the first place, to deliver himself from that repressive Midwestern provincialism in order to surround himself with people who valued his vision, his replication of American things like soup cans and Brillo boxes and Elvis that were not soup cans, Brillo boxes, or Elvis. When President Trump tweets about being president of Pittsburgh, not Paris, he's referring to the Pittsburgh of the 20th century, of smokestacks and steelworkers and coal mines where I got mugged at 2 a.m. outside the Greyhound station escaping Detroit for Baltimore circa 1990. The president's not talking about governing today's Pittsburgh with its craft beer houses, vegetarian restaurants, and dropping crime rate. It's impossible to know which Pittsburgh someone's referencing when they mention it, which must have been the same for Warhol's mother, who, when she read about her son in Time magazine back in 1967, must have been so proud to learn Andy was making an honest Midwestern living, working long hours in a factory of his own creation. My dad was supposed to be here. He came up. He just retired from a university to the east of here. We actually were able to work on a book together. He's in maternal fetal medicine, and we've traveled. I was able to help him with his memoir. He, for 30 years, worked in Ghana, Africa, building a foundation of medicine and teaching. And before he was there were very few OBGYNs in country, and his job was how do we educate them and how do we make them stay. And so we went back 35 years after he had started that program through the university, and to go back there with my 17-year-old daughter and see all these people referring to him as like the Godfather, and seeing all these amazing doctors, and they're all populating all over Ghana. It's really incredible to see. So growing up with a father as a gynecologist was something. We learned not to ask, like, how was your day at dinner, because he'd, like, tell you. My brother actually is 4 years younger than me. He's actually an OBGYN, been at the same places where my father was. We used to go to work with him when he was in Baltimore, and he would leave us in his office and come back and say, who wants to see a cesarean section? And my brother would raise his hand, and I would stay in his office and play with all the weird things in his desk. So this is a poem called On Having Two Gynecologists in the Family. It's great to have last-minute prescriptions filled without appointment. 3 months' worth of NuvaRing samples arrive in the mail, and a calm voice at 4 a.m. telling you after your water breaks to relax, have a glass of wine, take a hot bath. But at one point, you start receiving angry calls from parents of your daughter's friends who say your daughter replied to their daughter's claim that they came from their mother's belly with, I came from my mom's vagina. She's 4. The phone keeps ringing. My father says talk to a pediatrician. My brother suggests private school. So I'm in Miami. Been down in Florida since I graduated from high school up in Michigan. I find I write more about Michigan and Florida, and now when I'm up in Michigan, all these Florida poems are coming to me. So have you ever heard of the expression, the Florida man? It's a cliche. I try to explore that here. Florida man. I would trade the entire Rolling Stones and remaining members of The Who if we could have kept Tom Petty. But I admit this math is weird. If we're preventing Texas from seceding in order to keep Austin part of America and forgive Georgia since it's home to Athens and Atlanta, perhaps Tom Petty being born and meeting Elvis in Gainesville is enough to redeem the entire state of Florida. A state that teases tourists in Creole, Hebrew, Portuguese, French, Russian, Ukrainian, or some pidgin in between, and 9 Spanish dialects similar enough to be related, but too idiosyncratic to make it through dinner without fighting over which loves their mother more. A state that presides in Everglades courtrooms hearing arguments made by alligators, pythons, and armadillos over squatters' rights and eminent domain. A state of turnover chains and Ponzi schemes, hanging Chads and Al Gore, the sinewy bones of mangrove fingers, Luther Campbell and Bobby Bowden, jet skis scarring manatees, Hemingway's 6-toed cats, suburbia saturated with a fecundity of rotting mangoes fallen from backyards. A state with large shells abandoned along its chest like hats tossed during last night's New Year's celebration. Lines cracked across their crowns by farmers to suck out the conch meat. A state renowned for its beaches but imports its sand. A state that's a mashup on 95 of Driving Miss Daisy, Grand Theft Auto, and Apocalypse Now. A state that repaints retired school buses and fills them with migrant workers to deliver early morning to the groves. A state whose sun purples newsprint and plasters it across sidewalk pavements. A state whose Florida man won a Darwin Award after being arrested three times, charged with public indecency and sexually assaulting the same fold-out couch in a series of separate but strangely singular occurrences. A state whose meth houses explode into starless night like 1,000 validated stereotypes. While 200 miles south, dry drunks argue over lemonade in the last of the tiki hut shade. If Buddy Holly's alma mater was your rival school, might you consider switching allegiances? One shouts to another, "You can blame me for asking the question, but not for the answer you give," before nodding off knee-deep in the rising tropical storm surge of America's second antebellum. They said it was a weather balloon. Eileen's daughter holds happy birthday balloons at the bus stop when I drop off my daughter. When I wish her happy birthday, Eileen tells me it's not her birthday. She just found the balloons and has been carrying them with her for 3 days, smiling as everyone who passes wishes her happy birthday. But as the bus pulls away, she releases the string to wave it goodbye, and she cries as they lift into the sky as the sun begins to scald the edges of the morning clouds. "Oh no," says Eileen, "the turtles and the manatees." When I look to the sky, I only see balloons, not turtles, not manatees. Eileen sees balloons not as they are, but as they'll be, as deflating foil and latex sinking into the ocean, suffocating the animals at home in those silent seas. I think of how a thing is a thing, but also other things, how we try and say what we mean with language, but words are as imprecise as a drunk sniper taking aim atop a spinning carousel, and how Ezra Pound used 15 languages in the Cantos in order to employ the correct word to perfectly express his meaning, deciding the 3 rippled hieroglyph best expressed water. As I'm walking home, my wife texts me an eggplant emoji, and I can't tell if this is a sexual advance or a request to stop at the vegan grocery. Should I respond with a thumbs up image or a meme of frustrated Nicolas Cage? So much depends on whether the red wheelbarrow is just a wheelbarrow or a symbol of American industrialism. Behind the bushes of a neighbor's house, I think I spy a giant gray blue heron, but it's just a stupid black smart car parked in their driveway. Well, we were talking about Putin earlier. I got a Putin poem. And again, some of these Putin stories you don't have to make up because they're real and they're stupid. Robert Kraft stole, not Robert Kraft, Vladimir Putin stole Robert Kraft's Super Bowl ring. He, the owner of the New England Patriots. This actually happened, and I thought it would be fun to examine in a poem. So this is Robert Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots, accuses Vladimir Putin of stealing the Super Bowl ring. "I've been advised not to ask for its return. The Department of Defense discourages travel to Russia, even Moscow, now that you support Syria, but this is not a game. As you pushed my ring over your knuckle, you laughed and said, I could kill a man with this ring. Should I have taken this as confession or threat? Then you unscrewed and pocketed it as though it were the mobile number of some Lithuanian hostess. Your guards corseted themselves around you, and me only up to their chins. Now you're silent as an Orthodox church after the Pussy Riot arrests. When you visited the UN, you didn't even call. If you really thought the ring was a gift, surely you'd treat me better than a busboy or some Bolshevik locked away in a Siberian gulag. It's not about the money. What's 25,000 to men like us? You were president, now you're czar. I've seen the photos of you, always shirtless, on horseback, big game hunting with arrow quiver and compound bow, crossing a stream with wide bivouac smile. We've so much in common. I'm a widower, you're divorced. We love pretty girls dancing in bikinis, tasting suntan lotion in their sweat. Should I believe the senator who claims no former KGB has soul, or my president who saw it in your eyes? I would have introduced you to Tom and Gazelle. Now evidence of my Patriots' victory is housed in some Kremlin storage facility, forgotten like the Cold War. I doubt you even wear it. I've got 3 more. Oh, is that okay? Sure. All right. Thank you. This is I guess a political statement. It's called Northern Aggression. Like a rainbow trout caught in overfished waters for the good of the habitat and fishermen who may come after, we let it off the hook. We've been hearing this same argument since Appomattox. Words are only light. What's needed now is fire to finally end the Civil War and rid ourselves of anti-federalist states' rights fundamentalists. The older generation won't like it, but this older generation is the problem. We will solve by federalizing New York State's tuition-free college proposal, so kids can stay in state and get a university education, or travel to New York, California, Michigan, and get an out-of-state education for the same cost. Kids will leave the South and the country will blend, diversify as kids from Brooklyn, Bloomfield Hills, and Brentwood, happy to get away from home, will spend 4 years in South Carolina, Mississippi, or Arkansas before getting the hell out. And when native Southerners graduate from northern schools, they'll never go back to thinking the planet's 10,000 years old, or that climate change is liberal propaganda, or that Jesus rode a pterodactyl, or that corporations are people deserving of voting rights, or that deist rhetoric of the founding fathers presupposes they intended the United States to be a Christian nation in perpetuity. You know what I'm saying, thank you. Or that economic segregation is not planned segregation, or that a free market will regulate itself, or that there's no need for black entertainment television since there's no white entertainment television, as though ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC are not a monopolized white entertainment television conglomerate where sitcoms set in New York City lack black actors, much less characters, or that one sexual history dictates one sexual identity, or that the NRA isn't a business front for a terrorist organization, or that feminism is an encroachment on male sovereignty, or that the Confederate flag is suitable to present anywhere other than a rebel museum or a Dixieland cemetery. I'd like to read one poem from my old book. This is called Searching for My Soul. The Kia Soul I rented when my Mazda died in the supermarket parking lot was stolen from my driveway Tuesday night. I called the cops, my soul's been stolen. I reported, they asked when I saw my soul last, is there anyone who'd want to take my soul? They asked the color of my soul. My soul was brownish green. It wasn't very big. My wife says my soul was ugly. My neighbors they don't believe I had a soul. No one in town has one. The cops put out an APB. What happens to stolen souls once driven on the highways? Are they ever found, ever returned to soulless owners waiting for their phone to ring with some update? Your soul's been found, stripped bare, abandoned, half submerged in a Tampa canal. Would I want it back after my soul was handled by someone else? Would I ever be comfortable with my soul again? My soul was scratched, it handled poorly, at least it was insured. And I'd like to finish with a new poem. And again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for, Laura, you weren't here earlier, I thanked you. You're awesome, thank you so much for everything. Again, it's been a real treat. And this poem's called Times New Roman. As part of some viral challenge emanating from Sweden, my daughter asks how often I think about the Roman Empire. Now, I've taught rhetoric at the college long enough to approach this brand of questioning like Achilles and chainmail high tops. In my defense, Schwarzenegger recently recommended Marcus Aurelius to young readers, and Jeep's running a year-end special on its 24 Rubicon. Should I ignore the state of Florida equating AP African American Studies courses to hemlock, black-hooded goths on skateboards terrorizing elderly citizens in Publix parking lots, and black-booted Bavarians marching red flags over I-4? There's revanchist whispers reported from the East where they reference alternate calendars. Nothing's always true. While Christian performance artists who storm the Capitol claim an open court to be part of God's army rather than brainwashed by their Twitter feed. But that is a Trojan horse of a different color. Reset the Constitution in Helvetica or Comic Sans. You don't need to be Caesar to see when low information voters elect the government, people get the rulers they deserve. In a congressional hearing, a representative of Texas requests the National Forest Service to alter the orbit of either Earth or the moon to prevent future wildfires. What cruel beast this way slaughtered Dunning-Kruger upon Mount Stupid's peak? Last century Common Era, Walcott set the Odyssey in the Caribbean, Joyce in Dublin. You might still find a cynic in America today, quoting Thoreau, leading packs of yapping dogs through unlit streets searching for verisimilitude, but most fathers wind up delivering themselves home to their daughters upon their shields, babbling about battles they abandon and how there's not enough gods to save us. It takes more than Corinthian columns to support civilization. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for being here. Okay. In the spring of 2008, the RCAH Center for Poetry held its first Spring Poetry Festival. It was important to us to open with a poet who was nationally respected, but also one whom we knew would respect the values and help create the traditions of the residential college in the arts and humanities. We thought immediately of Carolyn Forché, an MSU graduate, a Justin Morrill alum, and a poet who most certainly is politically engaged. Because this is, I believe, her 5th visit to the RCAH Center for Poetry, and because so many of us have been moved again and again by her calling us to the poetry of witness, it seems almost unnecessary to introduce Carolyn Forché, but I will. Currently, Carolyn, who has an incredible history with art and activism, is the Lannan Visiting Professor of Poetry and Professor of English at Georgetown University. Since winning the Yale Series of Younger Poets Prize in 1975 at age 24, and I believe she was the youngest poet at that time to ever win that award, for her book Gathering the Tribes, a book rich with the experiences of family, sex, and coming of age, she has continued scrutinizing the world around her. Following its publication, Forché received a Guggenheim Fellowship and traveled to El Salvador as part of Amnesty International in time to witness the unfolding civil war. With eloquence and empathy, she recounted what she experienced there in her second book, The Country Between Us, giving us a personal face to the atrocities she witnessed. Although the book, which won the Lamont Prize for Poetry, was published in 1981 and became a national bestseller, there are many lines in these poems that find resonance with us today. Quote, "There is nothing one man will not do to another," she writes in a poem titled The Visitor. And in the message, she speaks of the time when we lived in the hour farthest from God. "Poetry is news that stays news," wrote Ezra Pound, and if you listen to or read the news today, you know how timely and critical Carolyn Forché's words are. In a critique for the Los Angeles Times Book Review, Art Seidenbaum maintained that the poems of The Country Between Us chronicle the awakening of a political consciousness and are themselves acts of commitment to concepts and persons, to responsibility, to action. In her 2019 memoir, a finalist for the National Book Award that year, What You Have Heard Is True, the title taken from the opening line of one of her most read and taught poems, The Colonel, Claudia Rankine notes, "What You Have Heard Is True is as much an enthralling account of a life marked by an encounter as it is a document of time and place." Carolyn Forché's urgent and compelling memoir narrates her role as witness in an especially explosive and precarious period in El Salvador's history. Carolyn Forché has gone on to edit Against Forgetting, 20th Century Poetry of Witness, which Gail Ronsky pointed out in the Antioch Review, offers irrefutable and copious evidence of the human ability to record, to write, to speak in the face of those atrocities. Forché's most recent anthology, co-edited alongside Ilya Kaminsky in The Hour of War, Poetry from Ukraine, offers a startling look at the way language both affects and reflects the realities of war and extremity. Her anthology, Against Forgetting, 20th Century Poetry of Witness, published by Norton, was followed in 2014 with her anthology, The Poetry of Witness, The Tradition in English, 1500 to 2001. 1994 saw publication of The Angel of History, the winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Award, a collection of Forché's own poems, which continues to address the 20th century political landscape, including both the continuation of unspeakable acts and the survival of the indomitable human spirit. Her 2003 collection of poems, Blue Hour, returns to some of her earlier lyric impulses and personal memories. Though always in Forché's work is the awareness that we live in a world and a time where being connected to humanity requires us to observe and record, to see that the personal and the political are inextricably entwined, to understand that we are all in this thing called life together. Margaret Atwood writes of Forché's most recent collection, In the Lateness of the World, published in 2020, here is a poetry of courage and passion which manages to be tender and achingly sensual and what is often called political at the same time. Like John Donne, who understood that no man is an island, Walt Whitman, who said, I am large, I contain multitudes, Theodore Roethke, who wrote, in a dark time, the eye begins to see, and Audre Lorde, who told us, when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed, but when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak. Carolyn Forché is not afraid, and she continues to speak. Please welcome Carolyn.
Thank you, Anita. That was lovely, and thank you for your reading, Brad. So you had me at the elephants in the Homeland Security, it was, I don't write funny poems. So I'm glad that you helped us all to laugh tonight. Thank you. I'm very happy to be back here at my alma mater, my very specific alma mater in this building. I lived in Phillips, and I want to thank Anita and Lori, and also Toby for hosting me in his class today. It's always special to come back here. I'm going to begin with a new poem that I can't write poems from prescription, occasional poems. I've never been able to do that, but I was asked to write a poem about one of the birds that inhabits Washington State for a book of birds of Washington State. And they let me pick my bird. So I said, all right, well, just give me a little bit of time. They said, you have a few months. So I picked the snowy plover, those little birds that run along the, well, months went by and I didn't write anything about snowy plovers, and I was worried. And then I got a reminder email, as one does, that my snowy plover poem was due in a couple of days. The pressure was on. And so I wound up writing about snowy plovers. It was kind of amazing. It was a first for me. So it's called The Hurry Birds. We called them hurry birds, the snowy plovers running along the sand in their congregation, never close to the water like the sanderlings, just back and forth in their hunt for sandflies, mollusks, mealworms, these puffs of down or sea foam on twig legs, onyx-eyed on the lower dunes, away from the water's edge. Their nests in the shallow cups of sand, left by the wind, or a child's pail, the footprint of a human, an animal track, or just an impression made by a stir of wind. Nests lined with bits of shell and pebbles, grasses and debris in invisible pockets of beach. They were here just as we remember them, when we didn't know what they were called, nor that their young sing while still in the egg. So much we didn't know as they hurried before us, that they nest only on open sand and never among the grasses meant to anchor dunes, grasses that are everywhere now, where the nests once were, or why they feigned a broken wing when we neared them. We know now. We know fire weather and sea rise, as they know the shadows of owls. If you see them, turn around and leave them your footprint behind you. So it's going to be in the book of birds. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to now move from the beach of the birds to the lighthouse, and I opened right to the page, and this is for you, Anita, because you like this poem, you told me. It was written while I was thinking about a very close friend who was from Ireland. And he was a busker, a musician who sang in the street for the Music in the Hat. And he knew that I loved lighthouses and that I always have to go and see the lighthouse. Maybe it has something to do with Michigan. But, you know, lighthouse people like to go and see the lighthouse. But they don't want anybody else there when they go see the lighthouse. So, you know, that's, you give each other looks, like how long are you going to be here? So you could be alone with your lighthouse. And so he said, I'm going to show you a magnificent lighthouse, but you have to see it at night, because in the daytime it's a dead building. And at night it really comes alive. So I learned the history of lighthouses, and then this busker from Ireland went into treatment for cancer. And then a few months later, I did, and he taught me how to do that. And so I wrote this for him, and I made it and he didn't. So poems are always about two things, what they seem to be about and the other thing. So this one, you'll guess the other thing. The Light Keeper, a night without ships, foghorns calling into walled cloud, and you, still alive, drawn to the light, as if it were a fire kept by monks. Darkness once crusted with stars, but now death dark, as you sail inward. Through wild gorse and sea wrack, through heather and torn wool you ran, pulling me by the hand, so I might see this for once in my life. The spin and spin of light, the whirring of it, light in search of the lost, there since the era of fire, era of candles and hollow wick lamps, whale oil and solid wick, colza and lard, kerosene and carbide, the signal fires lighted on this perilous coast in the Tower of Hook. You say to me, stay awake. Be like the lens maker who died with his lungs full of glass. Be the yew in blossom when bees swarm. Be their amber cathedral, and even the ghosts of Cistercians will be kind to you. In a certain light, as after rain, in pearled clouds or the water beyond, sea or sensed water, sea or lake, you would stop still and gaze out for a long time. Also when fireflies opened and closed in the pines and a star appeared, our only heaven. You taught me to live like this, that after death it would be as it was before we were born. Nothing to be afraid, nothing but happiness, as unbearable as the dread from which it comes. Go toward the light always. Be without ships. So the Tower of Hook is the Hook Lighthouse, and it's right across the water from the Crook Lighthouse. So I think by hook or by crook came from, you know, sailors, right? I never knew why people said that when I was little, and then I learned it. There's a poet who some of you know, Ilya Kaminsky. He is originally from Ukraine, from Odessa, Ukraine, and he is deaf. He's a brilliant poet. I met him when he was 19, and now he's old. I mean, like, even maybe 50 or something, I don't know, you know, old. What young people think of as old. So he and he came when he was a teenager, like 15 years old. And you know, in Europe, everyone's out on the streets at night, walking and everything. And his family wound up in the wintertime going to their new home, Rochester, New York, at night. And the little boy looked out the window. He was kind of a teenage little boy. And he thought there had been a war because there was no one anywhere on the street. And then he learned, of course, that Americans don't go out at night or on the street, or they don't think it's fun to walk in the city or something. So he was talking about this beautiful, magical Odessa all the time. And he wrote a book called Dancing in Odessa. And he had visions of Odessa. And so I thought it might be a good idea to take him back to Odessa on a trip. So in 2004, we went to Odessa in Ukraine together. And it's a mixed thing if you go into exile. It's a mixed thing to go back. And so I think it was still a good idea, but it wasn't the joyful return I was imagining it to be. This is a poem I wrote for him called Exile. The city of your childhood rises between steppe and sea, wheat and light, white with the dust of cockle shells, stargazers, and bones of pipefish. City of limestone, soft enough to cut with a hatchet, where the sea unfurls and acacias brought by Greeks on their ships turn white in summer. So yes, you remember, this is the city you lost? City of smugglers and violinists, chess players and monkeys, an opera house, a madhouse, a ghost church with wind for its choir, where two things were esteemed, literature and ships, poetry and the sea. If you return now, it will not be as a being visible to others. And when you walk past, it will not be as if a man had passed, but rather as if someone had remembered something long forgotten and wondered why. If you return, your father will be alive to prepare for you his mint cucumber soup or give you the little sweet called bird's milk. And after hours of looking with him for his sandals lost near the sea, you visit again together the amusement park where your ancestors are buried, and then go home to the apartment house built by German prisoners of war to whom your father gave bread, which you remember surprised you. You take the tram to a stop where it is no longer possible to get off, and he walks with you until he vanishes, still holding in his own your invisible hand. We are in the midst of very difficult times, perilous times. I think we all know what that is. I taught on an island in Greece for about 7 summers, and it was an island of Thassos. It's right next to Lesbos, which is the island of the refugee camps. And you know, the Greeks, they would come in these terrible boats and ships and falling apart boats, and so many of them sank in the sea. And the Greeks would go out in their fishing boats to rescue people and bring them ashore, and then the government made that illegal. You could only rescue people if you were an official state-sanctioned institution. Well, the Greeks don't listen to any of that. They just kept rescuing people. They don't pay taxes. They don't, you know, obey officialdom. And so the people kept being rescued. I learned a lot about the situation of the refugees in Europe at that time. And then I wound up in Milwaukee, teaching for a semester As a Michigander, I should have known better than to choose winter semester, but that's what I did, and I wound up living in downtown Milwaukee in a hotel, teaching at Marquette. And winter, it's very cold in Milwaukee, and the weather is very unpredictable, and ice blows sideways, and you know. So most of the time I rode the bus when I could, but if it was really bad out, which was many times, I would take a taxi, those 6 or 7 blocks to school. And there's about 100 cabs floating around downtown Milwaukee, but this one driver was often the one to pick me up. And both of us noticed it on the 3rd or 4th time. He said, "I've driven you here before to the school." And I said, "Yeah, I recognize you." And finally, we were in a snowstorm, and he was taking me home to my hotel, and I asked him something I never ask people. I asked him where he was from. And because I saw the visor in his, photograph and his name, and he said, "I'm from Homs in Syria." Well, Homs had just recently been leveled by aerial bombardment. So I said, "How did you get from Homs to Milwaukee?" And he turned off the meter, and he turned off the cab, and he said, "I will tell you, but you're a poet, you need to write about this someday if I tell you." I said, "I can't promise I don't write occasional poems. I'm not sure anything will ever come out." But he talked until the whole car was buried in snow. And this is what he said. This has mostly come from him. The boatman. "We were 31 souls," he said, "in the gray sick of sea, in a cold rubber boat, rising and falling in our filth. By morning this didn't matter, no land was in sight. All were soaked to the bone, living and dead. We could still float," we said, "from war to war. What lay behind us but ruins of stone, piled on ruins of stone. City called Mother of the Poor, surrounded by fields of cotton and millet. City of jewelers and cloak makers, with the oldest church in Christendom and the sword of Allah. If anyone remains there now, he assures they would be utterly alone. There is a hotel named for it in Rome, 200 meters from the Piazza di Spagna, where you can have breakfast under the portraits of film stars. There, the staff cannot do enough for you. But I am talking nonsense again, as I have since that night. We fetched a child, not ours, from the sea, drifting face down in a life vest, its eyes taken by fish or the birds above us. After that, Aleppo went up in smoke. And Raqqa came under a rain of leaflets warning everyone to go. Leave, yes, but go where? We lived through the Americans and Russians, through Americans again, many nights of death from the clouds, mornings surprised to be waking from the sleep of death, still unburied and alive with no safe place. Leave, yes, we'll obey the leaflets, but go where? To the sea to be eaten? To the shores of Europe to be caged? To camp misery and camp remain here? I ask you then, where? You tell me you are a poet. If so, our destination is the same. I find myself now the boatman, driving a taxi at the end of the world. I will see that you arrive safely, my friend. I will get you there. So that is how it is on the other side of the ocean, and now we know how it is on this side. We all have a lot of work to do. I'm going to read a new poem, and it's weird. It's a weird new poem. It connects to Ilya, and it connects to, we discovered that weaponized drones were being used in Gaza, and they were facial recognition drones. and they were armed, these drones, and they would fire around when they recognized a face. And the kids thought they were toys. So I will let you draw conclusions about what happened to so many kids before they discovered why. Then, because I stayed connected to Ukraine a lot, I learned that now those same drones were being used in Kherson in Ukraine. So I said to Ilya, I got in touch with Ilya, and I said, you've got to tell them in Kherson to get the kids that they're not toys. And no, don't look at them, and don't chase them, and don't pick them up. Then I went down the rabbit hole, as we do on the internet when we're researching, and I learned way more than anybody should know about drones. And I know that many of the drones are used, okay, for deliveries, like in the drone you didn't tip in your poem, and some of them are weaponized, and some of them are just surveillance drones, and they're everywhere. And I started to write this poem, and I thought first I was writing to Kherson, or what I was writing to people who were under threat, and now I know that I was writing to all of us. This poem was first published in Romanian, and it was first read in Transylvania in English by me to an audience of people from Moldova and Ukraine. And so it's in English now. And the New Yorker says they're going to publish it, but they won't tell me when. I guess they said it's about space in the magazine. And they have to figure out where to put it so that it doesn't conflict with the ads. So it's called, now I'm going to read it to you, and you have to understand that I know it's weird, okay? I get that, yeah. I'm being watched from above. They see everything, not only from the air, but from the side and rear. To help you stay invisible, these tips have been compiled. There are no secrets to staying completely invisible, so they are not included here. Dig in. Everything is watched, everything from buildings to trees. Camouflage yourself and your dwelling. All changes in placement, color, or design are noticed. They are above you nevertheless and will not disappear. They will notice anything of interest. There must continue to be nothing of interest to them. Make use of what you have. In the forest there are branches, turf, and grass. In the settlements there are bricks, slate, and boards. In the open, consider the time of year. Use sand, snow, or leaves typical of the season. Do not draw attention to yourself by throwing anything away. Bag, bottle, wrapper, paper, all will make you visible. If you are already in a littered space, there is no need to tidy up. Avoid trampling new paths. Use the paths that were there before you. Avoid straight lines. There are no straight lines in nature. Avoid movement on roofs, between buildings, and near windows. Do not stand where you will stand out. Don't rush to cover the windows with blackout paper or blankets. This changes the building's facade. Use hidden roots that are difficult to see from above. Leaves, branches, moss. Hide the generator under a canopy. Keep the fuel in a separate place. Do not hide together with the fuel. Keep increasing the number of hidden rooms. Having one safe place where everyone can stay together is a big mistake. Never gather more than 3 together. Always have a second entrance in case the first is destroyed. Backpacks, boxes, and zinc draw attention. Do not smoke, use flashlights, or light bonfires at night. Make sure your phones are in flight mode. This helps you to stay invisible, but don't be fooled. If your phone is on, they can learn everything about you. Your position can be detected with radio signals, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. More than 3 devices is considered a cluster that arouses interest. If possible, create false clusters away from your positions. Avoid moving in groups, They are looking for a human face. Move tree to tree with spacing between yourselves. Stop only in the shade. Hide only in the shadows. Remember that rooting in a place kills. Do not become predictable. Do not become rooted. Watch the air. All objects in the air should be considered a danger to you. The sooner you detect them, the more time you have to prepare. During the day, they are first detected by sound. At night, they can be seen in the thermal imager at a distance. It is better to change your position at dawn or dusk when there are fewer in the air. If you see them high in the distance, do not run. If they hover above you, you are in their sights. Take shelter or run in a snake, but do not forget other threats. Touching one that has fallen is a bad idea. In the event of attack, use of smoke may be necessary. With a smoke screen, you can hide movement or simulate damage. A well-applied smoke screen can hide a position for some time. Never, however, be in the center of a curtain of smoke. Set the smoke screens differently depending on the wind. Frontal, oblique, or flanking. Here the tips end. Watch the air. Do not forget about the wind. Okay. So, I told you it was strange. I hope we don't need to listen to its advice. This is another new one, and it's also strange, but in a very different way. It's called Luggage. It's a little bit dreamlike what happens to time for me these days. I can see lots of moments at once in my life. Okay, luggage. The luggage was last seen at a hotel on a park square in a city where I have never been. But I am hearing that music again, especially in the air with the clouds beneath me. Rainless clouds that drift over farms snaked by rivers of caught light. The shadow of the plane darkening the droughting fields, bristle and despair. While on the ground, the girl I was decades ago looks up. Not because a sound was heard, but because something came between the sun and herself. As she gathered the dry linens she was to fold and take in, a plane like a jack in a game of jacks, silver in the hot sky, not an enemy plane, no, not this time, but nevertheless she watched until it was entirely out of sight, and the woman she was to become flew on without knowing how her luggage came to be there. This is for Daniel Simko, who was a good close friend of mine, and he was from Slovakia, and he was a translator of Georg Trakl. He was a librarian at the New York Public Library, and he was a secret poet, a closeted poet. He didn't want to ever send his poems anywhere. He kept them all in drawers and boxes and files and folders. And so after he died, we went and got them all and sent them to a press and published them. Because he should have known that was going to happen. But this is a poem I wrote for him, and it's for a while we were in Paris together, my son, my husband, and Daniel was there for a time staying with us while he was translating. So it's called Translation. In a cafe, near the entrance to the catacombs, you wrote your English versions of poems composed in the voice of a thrush in a cage. Winter trees, plane trees, iron benches, bocce in snow. This is where I found you most afternoons, cigarette lit, stack of books folded up Le Monde, writing into the past with your oldest pen, unraveling your script, then rolling it up again, music turned back into ink on paper. a symphony on the table, face down. I was a young mother pushing a carriage then, the little one trying to free himself, as he now has done, while behind the glass door of an armoire, armies of paper soldiers fought, bells ringing like stones through the clouds, an army of graves upright. How to be still as you were, to keep quiet as one language enters another, leaving all usual worlds behind. Because fog is not the same as violin. Fog is flute, and violin is maple, spruce, and willow singing. You wrote like a mole in its tunnel, dreaming of stars. Thank you. I think I'm done now. One more? Okay, I'll close with the last one in this book. This was the chemotherapy poem I wrote. It was, this is for all of you who've been through something like that or been through it with somebody else. It's also strange in another different way. It's called What Comes. To speak is not yet to have spoken, the not yet of a white realm of nothing left, neither for itself nor another. A no longer, already there, along with the arrival of what has been, light and the reverse of light, terror as walking blind along the breaking sea, body in whom I lived. The not yet of death darkening what it briefly illuminates, an unknown place as between languages, back and forth, breath to breath, as a calm in the surround rises, fireflies in lindens, an ache of pine. You have yourself within you. Yourself. You have her. And there is nothing that cannot be seen. Open then to the coming of what comes. Thank you. And my sister's here with me. Keep this beautiful college just as it is.